Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me at benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcast because People of Distinction is a nationally and internationally syndicated show because of listeners like you. Our shows are available across all major podcast distributors as well as YouTube. And if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. We appreciate the support. Continue to like and follow and sit back and strap in because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Polly L. Spainhour. And we're going to be discussing her amazing memoir, The Color of Gray, available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a whole host of other places. You're going to want to check out this amazing book, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. Before we go any further, I want to point out the fact that Polly was brought to us by one of the best publishing firms in the business, people you already know, talking about Author Reputation Press. So if you're a writer who has written their masterpiece and now you need assistance moving it, contact ARP. This is exactly what they specialize in, and you're going to want to head on over to authorreputationpress.com to gather all the information on how they're going to do just that. And listen, it is a true pleasure to have Polly here on the line. People, I'm going to put out a disclaimer right off the bat. Understand, her book, The Color of Gray, is remarkably insightful. It is a wonderful resource, but it's going to be something that at times is going to be difficult to swallow. You see, because this memoir is a direct depiction of her journey with her late husband's battle with Alzheimer's. Now, even though there's going to be some tough moments here, remember, this book is meant to inspire. This book is meant to educate. This book is meant to be added on your shelf. Through her story, she offers a raw and honest look at the challenges of caregiving, the lessons learned through loss, and the strength found in love. I'm telling you, you're going to sit in as we discuss her powerful memoir, The Realities of Living with Alzheimer's, and the hope that she wants to share with others facing similar journeys. You know, in preparation for today's interview, I was doing some research, and Alzheimer's, I knew already, was something that was very prevalent in society and obviously only increases with age. But based upon the latest statistics, according to the Alzheimer's Association, 1 in 9 individuals age 65 and above will receive an Alzheimer's diagnosis. 1 in 3 aged 85 and above will also receive that. Whether you yourself receive an Alzheimer's diagnosis is one thing. If you then find yourself in a position to be a caregiver or be associated with someone that has it in your family, is something else entirely. And that's another aspect of this book that's going to offer so much, because her book doesn't just give the depiction of her life. It's also going to help caregivers throughout their journey and the battle themselves that they're also encountering. People, make sure you have your notebooks ready, because this is going to be one you're going to be able to take a lot of notes from. And understand that we're only going to scratch the surface here today. Upon conclusion, you're going to run and purchase your copies, because you're going to realize what a great resource this truly is. Polly, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing fine, and thank you for the privilege of taking part in this speaking engagement of my book. I just thank you so much for being willing to share with anyone who's interested about Alzheimer's.
Absolutely. You know, Polly, I want to take an opportunity and first and foremost commend you for the bravery of showcasing something that is so personal to you. You know, the journey of caregiving for someone that has the diagnosis of Alzheimer's is difficult in and of itself. And some days were better than others, I'm sure. But it's one thing to go through that and experience it yourself. It's another thing to have the bravery to allow this literary window that you've constructed and allow others, complete strangers, to see into those moments themselves. And, this is an assumption on my part, but I do believe it's safe to assume. I believe you were aware that by releasing a book that is so raw, so personal to you, was going to be able to offer assistance to so many of others out there reading the book. So thank you, and we commend you for being here with us to showcase it. Let's jump right in, Polly. The Color of Gray. Tell us more about this amazing book.
Sometimes I am at a loss when people ask me that because there is so much in this book. Each time I went over to review, to put it in book form, I was reliving what I had written. It's been very difficult, but I felt so driven by the time my husband passed away that I needed to share this with other people because it was what I needed to be able to have when he was diagnosed. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm sure people with greater ability than I would say, well, wonder why she didn't put this in there. But when he was in his middle 30s, I started keeping not a day-to-day journal, but different thoughts, because at that time, people just didn't talk about Alzheimer's. It was a not known subject. And I have found throughout my life that anything that deals with the mind, the brain, is hush-hush. And when I would try to get some feedback, some helpful feedback, it was not there. I bought books. I got books out of the library to give me some insight of what was expected of me, and there was none. The ones that was there were more or less sugar-coated. And I knew I was going to be a caregiver, and I wanted to know the facts. A lot of people would rather not know the facts, and they're in for a rude awakening. And there are a lot of people who stay in denial because they, for whatever reason, don't want to talk about it or don't want to know. And if they don't know, then it's like, well, I didn't know I could do that, or I didn't know I needed to do that. So, I'm not trying to be critical, but I've just been around people for a long time. And the 36-hour in a day book that this Alzheimer's Association sent to me that after he was diagnosed, well, we had gone through around 15, 18 years of hell and back. And I don't use that term lightly. Not knowing what was around the corner, not knowing what he was going to do, not knowing how I was going to deal with it. And no one to talk to. So that journal was a lifesaver for me. And prayer, a lot of tears. And during the process of all of that, as time went on, my first edition, I was not as brave as I am in the second edition. There were some things I did not mention in the first edition. But people do not discuss the sexual relations of these type people. They don't, of people who have general surgery. It's just pushed aside. Some doctors will discuss things like that with their patients, but I have heard, well, there's, the sexual relations with someone with Alzheimer's there is none. But as we get older, our bodies change, our thoughts change. We're not 18 years old anymore. Mm-hmm. And with someone, I don't know of anyone who knowingly turns away a hug or a touch. There are certain ways to touch these people, to talk with them. You learn to accept the small things. You learn to accept the little chuckles that are not normally there anymore. And I touched on that in my book. And I recommended a book to be read And this is for any age group. This book is also for any caregiver. It doesn't have to be boiled down to dementia, but I think all caregivers go through a lot of this discouragement.
Yeah.
And also abuse. And I was questioned on that. Why did you put that in there? And I said, well, it's not everyone's story who has Alzheimer's, but it was our story that played a part in it. And there again, people who deal with sexual abuse, it's not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
People hide from that. It's a stigma to it. People have not learned how to share their feelings, how to be helpful. A lot of times they're more critical. And I'm not going to discuss all of what I have in there, but I also have a book and an author of someone enlightened in that end of it. And people might think, well, I don't need to tell anybody, but so many times a person can have something wrong with them and go to the doctor, but they don't tell the doctor everything because it's none of his business. But when they start ironing everything out, that one particular part could really help them with their diagnosis and their treatment. And I just stuck my head out, my feet out, just waiting to be chopped off. But but it's, when I was younger, I would never, ever talked about things like this. See, my age group, we were taught not to mention anything that's private. The younger generation today are much more open, but everything that went in this book, I felt led by God to put it in there. I had discussions with him, and people can laugh about that, but I talked to God just like I am you. Are you sure you want this in there? And he assured me in his way that he did. And I really struggled putting part of it in there. But as a whole, I felt that it was all so important. And I just, if any part in this book helps enlighten someone else's life, to help encourage them, that has been my goal. And with the first edition, when I sent it to the publishers, I said, God, I've done all I know to do, and the rest is up to you. And when I went for book signings or presentations where people had purchased the book ahead of time, and they would walk up to me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for writing that book, I was like, thank you, Lord, that was my goal. And someone has mentioned publishing a book. You're not going to make any money off of it. I have heard that so many times. And I said, it's not about the money. It's about what's in the book. And yes, it would help me tremendously financially, but that wasn't part of it. It was like by the time Ken passed away, God was telling me, you do something with all those notes you kept. And I had a lot of them, which I kept before I started work every morning, on my break, on lunch, when I was eating, because I couldn't do any of that around him. And it was like I was fighting the whole time to get where I am now. And my suggestion for anyone, and I've heard this lots too, well, I've had things happen to me. I thought about writing a book, but I just never done it. And I say, well, why not? So if I can encourage someone along that line, go for it.
Polly, thank you very much for all of the information that you've offered. Listen, people, this, as I've mentioned, as she's mentioned, is a great resource to give you a snapshot, but also for caretakers that are placed in the position of needing to care for those individuals. And now that varies based upon a medical professional, based upon a significant other, and everything in between. My follow-up question that I want to go into, Polly, is something a little bit off the beaten path. But I understand that, listen, when you are in the position that you yourself have been placed in, and you mentioned before the differences in the relationship that you and your husband possessed once he began his battle with Alzheimer's. And I think that that's a key point that I want to hone in on next, because especially from someone in your position, when you're talking about a loving relationship between a man and a wife, and one of them gets the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, that's going to shift the identity of the relationship. And I think it's worth discussing. So I'm curious to know, how did your own sense of identity shift as you transitioned from being a wife to a caregiver, and then eventually shifting to now life without him since his passing?
Okay. This would be a good time. I wrote poetry during that time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it had nothing at all to do with Alzheimer's. Some of it did.
Yeah.
And I'll share with you, if I may, one that will kind of tell you how I felt during this. My heart is lonely without you. I'm reaching out for you, and you're no longer there. You have slipped away again into your own little world. Where have you gone? What do you see? What do you feel? Do you want everything to be quiet and still? What's in your mind? What are you thinking? You look straight ahead without even blinking. Do you have pain anywhere? Or do you really care? Are there things you can't face in the real world? Are your thoughts in such a turmoil that from true life you have recoiled? You have left me out in the cold for so long. Sometimes it's so hard to hang on to what we once had. And for me, that's rather sad. You do have to go through, and I did not have the guidelines that a lot of people have this day and time. I suffered a lot. I struggled a lot.
Yeah.
There was not all the information out there to the different ways of where you don't have the sexual relations the way you normally would.
Mm-hmm.
And they're different for every couple. And I had to struggle with that, with my spiritual background. A lot of times, and people can be critical. I have learned not to be so critical. I am learning. But that's one of the things people don't talk about. It's like they think this couple has just automatically been different. They don't stop to think that the spouse, along with the individual, are hurting. And see, the individual, they definitely don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
They have these desires, but they don't know what to do with them. And nursing homes have to deal with this with some of their residents. They don't realize that they are married and their wife or their husband is at home paying the bill for them to be there. But I read an article in the paper, it's been quite some time ago, of this woman who went to see her husband every day, and he would take her to see his friend there in the nursing home, and he would sit and hold that friend's hand. And she said that rather than being jealous of her or being angry with him, she was thankful that he had found a friend where he was at that point. And a lot of people, that's when marriages break up. And I don't want any accolades there for me because, I couldn't have gotten into it without the Lord. But couples, it's very easy for them to be tempted and to stray.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an easy, even in a normal, quote, relationship, it's not that easy. A couple has to work together to make things happen. And in this case, they're both alone. So I think with Alzheimer's, dementia, it's more I had to reshift my way of looking at things and respond to those touches, the hugs, the smiles, differently.
Right.
When that's all you've got, that's all you have.
Mm-hmm.
And for other situations, this book that I refer to in my book would help with a lot of those things and take a lot of the pressure off the couples. And as I say in this book, I am not a doctor, I am not a professional, but that's my intake on that.
Polly, I'm telling you, you are doing so much fantastic work here by comprising this book. As we let you go, because people, listen, you know what you got to do. You got to purchase your copies. All right. I could sit here. I could talk to her all day, but the onus is on you. But as we close out of here, Polly, is there anything you'd like to say to our listening audience before we let you go?
I would encourage them to reach out to people, talk to the pastors, talk to the people in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Don't hesitate to ask somebody for help. You kind of read my story in the book as to what all happened to me, but financially, a big part of these people lose everything they had, and that's what happened to us. We didn't have the long-term care plan insurance talked about as much as they do today, and we think we cannot afford that large payment a month. But when you go from that large payment a month to $5,000-$6,000 a month, that's a big difference. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we have to look past that and maybe try to suffice for that, and hopefully you never have to use it. But I have friends who in the last several years have been so thankful they had that. So I would suggest that. And if I may, if we are ready to close the interview, I would like to read the title of my book, The Color of Gray.
Yes, please.
I wrote a poem about it. I've received a lot of questions like, how did you come up with that name? Where did that come from? And it was, again, something out of my control. You stand there in front of me, but you're not there. The color of gray are your eyes as you stand with such a confused look on your face with no one near to help you escape in this photograph of you in my mind. You are wearing your blue and gray jacket that matches your eyes and is faded with age. Your eyes that once were blue now are gray. There is a jagged hole torn in the elbow of the jacket that has molded to fit the shape of your body and has grown old with you. Each time I come in contact with these soft, warm, comfortable claws, it has an aroma of Tamaka smoke. As your life comes to an end, the confused look will go away. Your eyes will again turn peaceful blue and will no longer be the color of gray.
People, I'm telling you, this is a remarkably heartfelt journey that is truly going to help open your eyes to so many things. I'm going to say it one last time. It's Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. It's a lot of other places. The book is called The Color of Gray by Polly L. Spainhour. Head on over there, pick up your copies today, and get lost in this incredible journey. Polly, this has been a true delight. Thank you for the wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you for comprising this book, but most importantly, thank you for being a guest here with us to discuss it through People of Distinction.
Thank you for your time today. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It's sad, but it's enlightening. I look forward to what the future holds. And thank you.